every single month you guys should be looking at the charts at the higher time frames and understanding where we are in the market, because this is very important, and this is why I emphasize on trading only a couple of pairs so that you can do in-depth analysis like I'm going to do in this video. So it's very, very important. Like anything, if you're going to invest in something like Bitcoin or something like this, and you know how to do technical analysis, you are not just looking at the 5-minute time frame, you are looking at the higher time frames to understand where you are in the bigger picture and to understand what opportunities you can have on the lower time frames, right? If downside moves in your session are just pullbacks or are they actual corrections, looking at how the higher time frames are closing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a full analysis and look at what opportunities will I have for next month on pound yen, what type of setups can I look to see based on a technical standpoint of doing a full analysis on this pair, right? So we're going to do this full analysis, look at, and it's going to basically teach you guys how to do a full analysis on your pair. And yeah, this is why I emphasize so much, again, trading one pair. It's very, very important. I'm going to get into it, look at what I expect, what type of price action I expect, and how to do this full analysis so that you can give yourself the best opportunity to have a profitable or a very profitable new month. So that being said, let's get straight into this video. As always, guys, before we start the video, can you please support the YouTube algorithm and leave a like and subscribe? If you're new here, subscribe. It always helps the channel and I would really appreciate it. And liking the video just gets this video out to more people so they can benefit, and really helps me and shows me that this effort I'm putting into these videos is being appreciated, which I really do appreciate. And if you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below. Also, I'm starting to become active on Instagram, so please, you can check that out as well. All of that shilling away, because that's what you have to do. That's a lot of shilling. And if you want to have further discussion, you can also ask me in the group. I'm not one of these people who just ignore. And yeah, so with that being said, we'll get into the video. All of the shilling out of the way. I'm on the road to 10k subs, would like to reach that. And yeah, let's have a look. Here on the monthly time frame, we actually did have a 3-month close here, right? So the 3-month close, you know, is closing very, very, very bullish here, right? So you can see we've closed here, and to be honest, we could actually see a backfill on the 3-month candle close. Now this is something very common, and this is, you know, known in traditional markets and stuff like this. And what we call it a backfill. So what a backfill means is that the next candle wick actually fills the previous candle towards around the bottom of this body here, right? So if we look at the previous candle here, we can see how we got a backfill of that candle before continuing up, which also gives us an opportunity for this month to come down to 159, or even as low as, you know, I wouldn't say 158, but around 159, but there is possible 158. And you'll see how important that becomes when we go on to the lower time frames, and you'll see why this zone is very, very possible for us to come into. And you can do simple back testing of how candles can backfill, and you can see there is the possibility when we're in an uptrending market, we do get a nice backfill of the previous candle. But obviously where we're closing here, we're closing above very key zones, right? So closing above this 3-month support here that we closed just at is very, very important. But we are pushing into, as you can see, this wick rejection area here, which you can mark up something like this where we can see we tapped into. I do expect us probably to come up here to 174, maybe even 171 minimum long term, right? But we might correct first. And, you know, looking at just how these candles are forming, once this flip and starts breaking the high, I don't see why. But until this high is broken here at 168, there's no question about continuation, and it's not going to happen, right? So let's go and see what we have on the monthly time frame here. So the monthly time frame, as you can see, we'll delete this box here. You can see we pushed into this resistance zone here, and this is why we're finding some resistance. And this zone is actually formed here in 2013, you know, so this is quite a old zone, but it is holding relevant. Even though we had this high volume push here, it is finding reaction due to this zone here. This could be as simple as people taking profits due to this zone, you know. But what I do expect is, since we've closed above this body here, as you can see, looking here onto this resistance around this area here. So we can see we have this resistance around this area. Let me just change this to style. We'll just make this, and yeah. So since we closed above this whole resistance area here, I do expect us to fill this whole candle here. So this is like the next target, to be honest, which is that 172 to 174 target, right? Which is also the top of this range. So these are long-term targets in this area, which do make sense, right? But we do need to see it break the highs to get the continuation. Otherwise, what we will end up forming is a range. Now, breaking this monthly low obviously does not look very good for a higher time frame. But remember, looking at a 3-month chart, we can have that backfill. Now, why is that backfill very important? Because now if we start marking up our monthly resistance zone, right, and have this all as a zone like this, so this is your monthly resistance zone here, and now we go into the weekly time frame. What do we see on the weekly time frame? So we ended last week with a long rejection down to the downside we had, and now we can start doing our top-down analysis, right? So this is obviously our resistance zone. Here we have some weekly support down at 158. Now remember what I just said, 158, 159 weekly support. Very important, right? So this is your, make this white, bold italic, and this is your weekly support here, right? So why is that important? Well, if you look at here, we had our basically our 2021 range to 2022 breakout. Now we're holding support above this range here, right? So this is very important to hold above. Anything closing back into this range, in my opinion, on a higher time frame, something like this, will be a major shift in market dynamic for pound yen, and we could look for it to come back down all the way to 149. But at the time now, it's not looking likely. We are still bullish. This is what you have to understand. So for me, based on higher time frame, monthly closing bullish, 3-month closing bullish, yes, we can have some downside in the beginning of the month, but I do think that we could even have a downside for a month. But I do think that this downside is ultimately going to be just a downside for further upside. So what we could end up doing is actually forming a range like this we had here. We can form this range up here, and then we can, before coming into around September, then we can get the breakout coming into the new financial year, which would also make sense like that, right? So that is also another option here. But what we're going to do, I mean, this video I'm going to keep societally on technicals because fundamentals can change and there can be a fundamental influence, but we're just going to keep it simple. And now we're going to go on to the daily time frame after seeing the weekly. So we have our weekly support, we know we have our monthly and weekly rejection zone. So this is the first support that we managed to not close below here, right? So this is going to be our daily support. Now this is very interesting area. If we do close below this daily support, then we're going to get that backfill. And where do you notice that backfill? So this is our weekly support. We had this fake out here, dip into the zone, close back, and this is looking like macro support in this area, right? So this is the key zone where we created support after pushing out. So after we had this breakout, we pushed up, created a target, pull back to this zone, pushed up again, pull back to this zone. Oops. Had a breakout, fake out to the downside, and then again consolidated within this zone. But this macro support, people are going to be looking at this, but this is going to be very high relevance area. Why do I say that? Because of a few reasons. First of all, this is our initial breakout zone. So this is where we initially broke out, right? And this is where we created our support to give us this upside push here, right? And what you notice about this support is you notice that it has had a lot of relevance, whereas we've created support, retested all of these zones, and then this wick here. This is what's very important because of this downside move, the third downside move. So there's 1, 2, 3. On the third downside move, where do we reject? We reject the support. So even though we created all of this support here, this support down here is still having relevance. Now, guess what? Where's that support? Oh, where do you guess? 159,700. Now, if we go back to the 3-month chart, where's a backfill of the 3-month candle? 159,700, right? So this is where I'm populating the idea that we possibly push down and have a backfill just like we did last month. Until we start seeing daily candles closing below this support, there's no downside in question, right? I mean, downside towards this, it's not in question yet. We need to have a daily candle closing below the support to give the continuation down to this support, in my opinion. Can we pull back as far as 158? Yes, we can. But what's very important, this here is the monthly low. So whether we take out the monthly low or not is in the cards. But even if we do take out the monthly low, I'm not bearish on pound until we start closing weeklies below this support. So we can easily take out the monthly low, and this could be a huge liquidity grab to give us the push to the top of the range. And essentially what we end up happening, and if you look at it in a simple way, we start trading in a range, right? And buys and sells can make sense in that range. So understanding where we are on the daily time frame, this rejection, don't ignore this rejection. We could easily from here start testing the top before having further correction down. Remember, we're speaking on a 3-month time frame to have a backfill. It could take a month before we even come and test this. So you guys have to understand what the time frames mean and really digest that and not be, oh, next week price will come. Yes, it can come down here next week, but it doesn't mean it will. And how do we know if it will? If we start closing dailies below here, will give us the highest probability to start looking for that. So now let's go to the 4-hour time frame and see what we see here. So this is our daily support. We can see how we've had that rejection here, and we have a key. So this is going to be a key 4-hour support here. As you can see, the relevance of the rejection we've had here. So this is going to be your key 4-hour support here. And this support is also, you know, if price is closing below here on a daily, we have to consider the support. So this is kind of a whole zone, but closing 4-hour below here will give you the continuation, I believe, down to this wick here. I don't see why, you know, it could bounce off this area here. This is also a very, very key zone here, but I think if we are closing higher time frame candles below that daily support, it will give us the continuation. Now, is this going to be an upside to pull back down to the bottom of this range? It is possible we play for this week in between this range here. It is very, very possible. So coming to next week, what are we going to look at? Well, weekly candle has closed bearish. You know, you can see it closed bearish below this support. So if we make a top wick and start coming down, it makes sense for sells, right? Daily candle, on the other hand, it has also closed bearish, but with a rejection, right? So we have to keep in mind this zone here. But this rejection could simply just be a pullback on 4-hour time frame. If we start on 4-hour time frame coming into next week, closing above this zone right here, right? Closing above this zone here. Yeah, we can look for upside, but remember, where's our initial breakout point? Our initial breakout point is actually this zone here, and this is our key 4-hour support here. So we could simply retest our initial breakout point and then continue down. But anything closing above 164, 164, 500 should give us that continuation to the top of the range. But based on the weekly candle, we'll need daily candles to close bullish before even considering that, right? Otherwise, this is now just a pullback for continuation to the downside, right? Structure has not changed. This is the first pullback after a push to the downside. But if we start getting a daily candle bullish here, then I can expect price to minimum 166 and even possibly come up to 167. So if you notice, we're trading in a range. Sells on Friday made a lot of sense, but coming into Monday, this could have just been a pullback to give us opportunities for buys. In my opinion, I would like to see either price closing above 164 to even give it a shot up to this resistance here. That's a 70 pip range, very, very tradable. And then see what happens here. If we start rejecting here, well, okay, that was your trade. 70 pips should be enough. If we start closing back in the range, then we should actually hit that 166 target and maybe 166 500, right? But remember, we're pushing into this key monthly resistance, so always a dangerous zone to trade in, right? So until that's why I rather see a daily candle. But if we get Monday madness, which we sometimes see on Monday, where the candles just start pushing, anything closing above here should give us opportunity for upside, as we can see this. But if we start rejecting here, you know, I would like to see more structure form, hopefully a range over agent session, something like this. And then we can start breaking outside of the range, which will give us a key support that anything closing below here will give the continuation towards the downside, right? So until that happens, until we're closing 4-hour bullishes and creating high supports, this could set up as an opportunity for buys. But clear buys after daily candle closes bullish, right? So that's basically how I'm going to wrap up the video. And it's very clear that on higher time frames we are bullish. And now what I understand from doing this higher time frame analysis is that we can pull back to 159, 158 deepest and still end up bullish. So what does that mean for me? Well, me looking for buys from 159 or 158 is going to be a very, 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 you know, crucial area that people will all be looking for sells. Oh, GJ's bearish, it's pushed down to 159. GJ's bearish. But for me, I'm like, this could be just a backfill. I'm not bearish just yet. And if I see any type of support forming in that zone, I'll be the first person to buy, right? Not first, but anyways, you get the point. Now, for coming into this week, I understand that we do have possibility to pull back more based on this weekly candle and easily get a wick fill down to 161. So I'll not be in a rush to buy. I'll not be in a rush to sell. I will just look at how price action forms and use it to my advantage to understand we're at the range. We're closer to the top of the range than we are at the bottom. We're in the middle of the range here, but This could be a pullback to give us one more test to the upside of the range. So I'll keep all of this in mind and keep an open mind to understand where we are trading in the market, right? So this is what people have to understand. This is the analysis you should be doing on a monthly basis. When if it's just a normal week that's ended, you can start from the weekly candle and understand. But this weekly candle closing bearish like this, it does have a rejection, but still it's not something to ignore, because this is a pretty, engulfing the previous daily candle, weekly candle, and closing below the support. So keep that in mind. That is useful information. Daily is rejecting, but is this a daily to pull back to this zone to give us more downside? That's what we'll have to see next week. That being said, take care, trade sharp, and until next time.